new lecture, and in this we will make a difference between literary and non-literary discourse. Now, discourse, we have already discussed various perspective related to discourse. We have already discussed linguistically how we can define a discourse, that we have already discussed, and a broader view by Michel Foucault, that discourse is a system of thoughts composed of ideas, attitudes, and other things that are related to making a subject subject, and how a subject expresses himself, herself in this world. So all such understanding, conceptual, theoretical, and practical, we have with this word discourse. And we know that the Latin root for discourse is discursus, and the meaning of this Latin root is to run to and fro. So to run to and fro, here we are talking about the text, and how can text runs to and fro when the text is in interaction, is in an interaction with the other text that is there. So this textual running we are talking about, and the meaning of this running will be how text interacts with other text and becomes meaningful, and how text gets its meaning from the context. So we can say that symbolic human interaction discourse. If we try to define discourse here, we can say symbolic human interaction is also one definition of discourse. Now, when we talk about this word symbolic, then there is a word like symbol, and when we think about this word symbol, then Charles Sanders Peirce name comes into our mind. Why Charles Sanders Peirce name comes into our mind? Because Peirce talks about three things. First is icon, second thing is index, and third thing is symbol. So it is interesting to understand the difference between these three terms. First is icon. So icon, according to Peirce, something that has the similarity with the actual object, the actual thing that it represents. For example, if there is a painting of an apple, and we can say that is an apple because that particular painting represents an actual apple that we have. Similarly, we have a statue, let's say a statue of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Now that statue, though it is very huge in size, but still that statue resembles late Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. So that type of example is an example of icon according to Peirce. When it comes to index, now indexing is related to something that's not visible, but we can make an assumption. For example, if there is a smoke, then what can we guess? That we can guess that there must be some fire, because there can't be a smoke without fire. So this type of relationship, where certain type of inferences are made, certain types of association assumptions are made, and certain type of evidentiality is involved, then we can say that this is an example of index. Now final symbol, because we have also defined discourse as symbolic human interaction. So symbol is something that is conventional according to Peirce, and here this definition of discourse also follows that thing that is conventional. Now when we talk about conventional, then we need to remember that there is no one-to-one matching, like icon, like a picture of apple and the actual apple, or uh, let's say there is smoke and there is fire. That type of thing is not there. So bank, now you can't cross question that why bank is pronounced as bank, or like why a financial building or a river bank is known as bank. Now there is no one-to-one relationship. So the signifier, the relationship between signifier and signified is arbitrary in terms of Saussurean uh, theory of linguistics. So discourse is again symbolic human interaction, and this symbolic interaction includes both verbal and non-verbal. Now many of you might be confused that verbal is only oral, but the meaning of verbal is related to language. Something that is related to language is known as verbal, and we know that language can be used both orally as well as in written form. So the meaning of verbal is both oral and written, and that is related to language. Now opposite of verbal is non-verbal, where language is not involved, but still it conveys certain meaning. So gestures, you make gestures, let's say high five you make, fine. Then other symbols or sign language like this symbol I make. Then generally, what is this symbol? This symbol is for victory. So generally we make this symbol that, okay, victory that we have. So even we are like suggesting that you will be victorious, or like I am victorious, fine, or victory will be with you. So like this thumbs up, like we have thumbs up. So we are just wishing best of luck to someone, like when we say like this. So all these are non-verbal signs and symbols and gestures, but they also interact and they also part in human interaction. When you compare human beings with animals, then you find that animals, they do not have this facility of language, this faculty of language, but still they communicate with each other. And how do they communicate with each other? They communicate with each other using certain gestures and certain symbols. So this is how they communicate. But we have this facility of language, plus we have this additional non-verbal signs as well. So we utilize them fully. So now the thing that you need to understand that is related to discourse is something that is symbolic human interaction, that is known as discourse. And when we try to understand discourse, then we also need to understand the Saussure sign. Now Saussure sign can be understood in the form of a word, any word or morpheme you take, and how that particular one morpheme interacts with other morpheme. For example, there is a word like unhappy. Unhappy is a word, and you know that unhappy is an antonym of happy. Now, what is happening here? Unhappy means not happy, but you know that there is one morpheme un, and that represents not, and that un is interacting with happy, and because of this interaction, happy is becoming not happy. So this relation, this interaction is important. So this interaction occurs all the time between words, and one word interacts with another word, and that's why different words, they become an expression becomes meaningful. For example, John loves Mary. Now you know, like John loves Mary, and John is an agent, John is the subject, and loves Mary is a predicate, and in that predicate you have transitive verb. You also know like what is a transitive verb. A transitive verb is a verb that requires two argument. One argument is John, another argument is Mary. What is an argument? Generally noun phrases, they are considered as arguments. So here you know like how this thing becomes meaningful. This thing becomes meaningful. First, there is a word order, a strict word order that you need to follow in English. At the same time, one morpheme, let's say John is one morpheme, loves is another morpheme, and Mary is another morpheme. And according to Saussure, like you have three signs here. So these three signs, they are interacting with each other. And because of this interaction, this one sentence becomes meaningful. So Saussure also says that everything depends upon relations. So this relation we are talking about relationship between signs, different signs, and how they interact with each other. So discourse, and when we consider discourse as symbolic human interaction, this thing comes into being because there are different signs, and those signs, they are interacting with each other, and that's why the entire discourse comes into being. Otherwise, we also know that in linguistics, generally a sentence, something that is beyond a sentence is known as discourse. So even two sentences, and how these two sentences are dependent upon each other, that can also make a discourse. We have seen in the example of M.A.K. Halliday and Hassan's a book, Cohesion in English, published in 1976, that wash and core 6 apples, put them in a bowl. So them, this anaphor refers back to the antecedent 6 apples, and how this discourse is created. So discourse is one paragraph, discourse can be one chapter, one page, discourse can be entire book, but larger than one sentence. Now, when we talk about discourse and the levels of human communication, then we need to understand there are certain things uh, when we try to study the structures of language, then we find that phonology, morphology, and syntax, they are related to form, and this phonology is a substance because without sound there is no form. So once we have individual sound segments, and those individual sound segments, they interact and they make a word, they make a form, and you have certain words, they interact with each other and they make a sentence, phrase, or clause. But there is a point of view, like theoreticians who study linguistics. So there is one view by Bloomfield, and what Bloomfield says, Bloomfield in 1933 argues that linguistics is only concerned with those phonological, lexical, and syntactic features which the utterances share. It was no concern of linguistics to explain how identical utterance can have different functions in different situations. So identical utterances, for example, I'm going to the bank, and now I'm going to the bank also means that I'm going to a financial institution and I'm going to a river bank. Now here, identical utterance, but it has two different functions in different situations. So what Bloomfield says, that it is not the work of a linguist to study that how this utterance is making two sentences, or how this utterance is becoming meaningful in a specific situation. Instead, Bloomfield says that a linguist is concerned about the phonology, morphology, and the syntax of a particular language. But contrary to what Bloomfield says, we have another view by Firth. And what Firth says in 1951, Firth says that language is only meaningful in its context of situation. So these are two different views. One is the formal view. If you take into consideration the Bloomfieldian view, that I am not concerned about the meaning making process, I am only concerned about the formation of language, then it is a formal view. And when you step into the meaning making process, that how meaning is understood, how meaning is produced, then you are into the functional view. So when it comes to discourse, it deals with meaning making. So when we are talking about discourse, obviously we are into a different realm. And what is that realm? That is the meaning making realm we are in. Then we have other views, let's say of Chomsky, and in his famous book Syntactic Structure, Chomsky talks about in 1957, and what Chomsky argues, that the fundamental aim in the linguistic analysis of a language L is to separate the grammatical sequence which are sentences of L, from the ungrammatical sequences which are not sentences of L, and to study the structure of the grammatical sequences. So here again, the meaning making is not uh, in the forefront, but if we take into consideration the definition of something that is grammatical, then we also know that something that is grammatical is also acceptable. So colorless green ideas sleep furiously, it is perfectly grammatical, and but it is not acceptable because it is not generating any meaning. So though not very explicitly, Chomsky uh, talks about the discourse and meaning making process, but still we find certain traces in Chomsky's argument that fundamental aim in the linguistic analysis of a language L, here L denotes any language, is to separate the grammatical sequences which are sentences of L from the ungrammatical sequences which are not sentences of L. So again, somehow we find that uh, discourse is talked about in Chomsky's argument, but not explicitly mentioned. So we also find views of Ross, Macaulay, and G. Lakoff, and what they say, they argued that one cannot, in fact, describe grammar in isolation from meaning. So again, in Ross, Macaulay, and Lakoff, we find that they are supporting Firthian view. And what is that Firthian view? Language is only meaningful in its context of situation. So context and situation is more important. We have also seen previously when we were discussing text and textuality and discourse, and we have seen that linguistic competence is not that important, but more important is situational competence. That means you know how to use language in different contexts, in different situations. So all such things is focusing on context and situation that we have. This is what we have previously also studied, and there is a quick recap that what is a text and how a text acquires textuality. And text acquires textuality because text occurs in some context. So what comes before and after is actually context. At the same time, when we talk about the literary style or literariness, then we know that the words, individual words, they are woven, and because they are woven, they create a literary fabric, and because of that literary fabric, we have something known as textuality, and we can call it text. So when we call it text, that means we are talking about not the physical form of the particular work. It can be hard bound, soft bound, virtual, but we are more concerned about the the quality, the content that is there, that is making something a text. This example we already discussed from Cohesion in English by Halliday and Hassan, that wash and core 6 apples. So how them and anaphor refers back to the antecedent 6 apples. And as I said that when you talk about discourse, that then a unit larger than a sentence is considered as a discourse linguistically. So here this can be an example of a discourse because it is something beyond a sentence. Again, when we talk about this context is important uh, for the text, but not any content, any context, but something that is knowable context, and not only knowable context or how something becomes knowable. According to Bakhtin's view, this discourse is the concrete living totality. That means we use all the knowledge that we have in order to find out the meaning of particular utterance, the meaning of particular sentence. So when we are in interaction with someone, and when someone says something, first our mind functions in a manner to find out on its own what could be the possible meaning of certain thing. And if our mind fails, because that is not the part of the concrete living totality of us, then we ask, like, could you be more explicit, could you be more lucid, in what context you are talking about this thing. So these are the things which are interrelated when we talk about this discourse. Now Jonathan Culler ponders one important question in his literary theory, a very short introduction. And what Culler ponders, what Culler thinks about, what is literature and does it matter, and what makes a text literature. So there is one interesting answer to this question, what makes a text literature, and what is that answer? Generally, a text in context is considered as a literature. So this is also a very handy definition of literature. If someone raises that what is literature, then you can say a text that is in context is also known as literature. So we can have this literary versus non-literary text as well, though non-literary text, they also occur in certain context. But the more important element, what makes a text literary, that is narrativity. And what is this narrativity or narrative? Something that is to related to telling a story. And once there is a story, then it becomes or it contains elements of fiction. So one thing is fictional, literary thing is something fictional, and non-literary thing is to convey information. This is one very broad and very clear-cut distinction that you have between literary and non-literary discourse, as well as literary and non-literary text. So there is another theoretician, Gerard Genet, states that literature is the art of language. Now, this one-liner definition is also a very good definition. If you put this definition against linguistics and try to define linguistics, linguistics is the scientific study of language. So what is the change? Scientific study is substituted by art and linguistics is substituted by literature. So how can you define literature is the art of language? So again, we are more into art and less into a scientific field. A work is literary only if it uses the linguistic medium exclusively or essentially. That means without linguistic medium, literature is not going to be generated. And when we talk about linguistic medium, that means we are talking about language, whether it is in oral form or it is in written form. But generally, written linguistic medium or something that is produced in written linguistic medium is considered as literature. So what about essays, letters, speeches, and biographies? Because these are also there, because they are also in the written form, essays, letters, speeches, and biographies. So Culler says both literary and non-literary works can be studied together and in similar ways. So they can be studied, they can be analyzed, but there is a difference, and difference is of narrativity. In literary work, you have certain narrativity, and non-literary work, there is no narrativity. So where can you find this narrativity? In novel, you find this narrativity, telling a story. In poetry, you can find, even in prose, you can find short stories, drama, biographies. So these are different genres. These are different types of literary discourse that we have. And I hope that you you might have read at least one example of each: a novel, a poetry, a prose, short stories, drama, biographies. And contrary to what is literary, we have non-literary. So textbooks, they are non-literary. Legal documents, they are non-literary. Articles in academic journals, they are also non-literary. Recipes, they are non-literary. How to cook books, they are non-literary. Then instructional manuals. So when we talk about articles in academic journals, if you are simply paraphrasing, like once you write a review and you simply tell the story or story in a paraphrase, then what you are doing, you are not writing a review, you are again making it something that is literary, and you are again into the storytelling. But as we have seen that when we were writing the review, and we have seen in the example in last two classes that when we need to write a review, the purpose is to convey information, not to tell the story. So you must have seen that our focus was not to tell a story when we looked at the review of Sons and Lovers, but purpose was to convey information, to make it an academic writing. So this is for the day, and I stop here. And if you have any doubt, then you can ask me.